Today, once again, I have my daughter with me now. I've figured out a little tip here. As you know, babies love pushing stuff off of, the high chair here. So we've got all these toys like this. Now, what you can do, you notice this clip. This is a magical item. What I realized is that you can easily just bring this clip over here and watch out. You can clip it on this, and then boom, she cannot knock it off. And that is where all the magic starts to go right, where things click together and she stays entertained. So we got that going for us. So today I was thinking what I will do is I will go over basically what I like to call burgers. Now, burgers is a fancy word for kind of those big enterprise architecture diagrams. Some people call them marchitectures. You could just call them architectural things, but they're always a layered stack of components or needs or services that you have when doing software, particularly large-scale enterprise software. And so there was a new one that came out from the dude over at the New Stack who writes on these topics, and then DigitalOcean just released a platform as a service that uses build packs, and I think runs on top of Kubernetes. Kind of fun. And so these are like a whole round of burgers that are coming out, just flying at us right and left, like that old game where the guy's serving up burger. It's called Burger Time. So I thought, I think it's helpful, one, because it's something I can talk about, but it's fun to kind of always be paying attention to the evolution of this thing. And I think what you'll see is that the burger's always been there, and the same basic needs are there. And so I think what's important to pay attention to is not that when a new burger comes out. Now, if you've never had a burger before, if you're kind of young, you haven't experienced a burger like my daughter, of course it's going to see like a crazy, interesting idea. And then, going a little too far ahead, if you're one of these, kind of like the children of LAMP and Rails and all these sort of simplifying things for a team of 1 or 2 people, burgers are going to seem ridiculous, as everyone's favorite Hacker News commenter always puts. I don't understand why you wouldn't just, and what they mean is just like, I know how to do something in a different way without any consideration for the 5 to 10 year management and governance that we'll have in a large organization with people of multiple skill levels, interest, caring, a variety of businesses changing, all sorts of other considerations that come in there. Because indeed, I guess they don't understand why X. So I guess we should jump into it. As a brief programming note, I'm trying to get a handy domain name to refer you to instead of some long name. But in the meantime, and I'll just forward it to this, I've created an index on my own. If you go to kote.io/Tanzu talk, let me show you what that looks like in case you don't understand how to spell those things. Let's zoom in. Are you ready? Okay, I was ready, but Chrome not ready. There we go. There we go. Right here. You can go to that, and let me just click on it. You can see what that ends up looking like. Now, I have not perfected this. You'll be able to watch the videos. This is just the show list of all the videos. Good job, WordPress, on this odd spacing here. And then, you can go to the official thing. You can see where Twitch is. You got links to the CTAs I put at the end, and so forth and so on. I'll try to add show notes on my blog so you get more detailed stuff than looking at the HackMD all the time. But anyways, on to the burgers, right? So I think, again, here's some examples that I'll get to. But, when you talk about a burger, let me scroll through the ones that I've curated here. I'll get to what these are. But, you can call these layer cakes, whatever. I like burgers best. So I always think of them as burgers. Hopefully you're interested in this. We'll get to this. This one is, I don't have a metaphor for it yet. It's a deconstructed burger, maybe. A la carte burger. We'll find out. What's wrong? Let's see. Let's get this here. We've got Sophie. Maybe all this burger talk has made her jealous. So when we're talking about a burger, right? This style of enterprise architecture, I wonder if you can just get rid of that. I think it's for a certain type of application, which is, especially nowadays, most of the applications out there, right? Not only is it for what you would call a 3-tier application, which is you have your UI layer, what the kids used to call business logic, and now these kids transformed into grandpas. But the business logic is just all the actual code that's unique to your application, what your business does. Let me check on how loud that background noise is. That's a good... Yeah, that's pretty good. And by background noise, I mean my daughter. I should stop with my hand gesturing because you won't be able to see her, right? Like, so maybe I'll... Boom! I get this side. But I think equally importantly, when you're thinking about burgers, usually are used for a distributed application, which is to say, if you imagine an application as one unit of software, oftentimes what you end up doing is you break that into components, right? And there's all sorts of good reasons to do this. You break it into components instead of being one long thing. It's easier to maintain, easier to have multiple people work on it. If done right, it's easier to kind of scale it or run it, all sorts of stuff. But a distributed application means that it's not just all on one computer, but it's often running over a network or some kind of networked thing. And this can be often is literally like it's on separate boxes or separate virtualized things, so it's simulating being a network. Nowadays, a lot of time it's over the same type of networking that the web uses or whatever. Oh, check that out. You can see my email. For some reason, Outlook thinks it would be really handy and polite to come in and flash itself to me. Like I'm going to be like, whoa! I got to check my email right away before, my pants get ruined in my boredom and excitement. Oh, don't lose that. Let's leave that right there. So, but the important thing here is that once you move to a distributed application architecture where you've got these components that are talking with each other over the network, you introduce several things that you need to deal with. One of them is these components have to find each other. Another one is that when these components do find each other, they have to authorize being able to talk with each other. Another one is that when they're talking with each other, they need to be able to understand each other, right? And on and on and on, right? And then there's also incompatibilities between them, right? This was a big concern way back when, is like if we update one of these services, it breaks all the other services and then we're coupled. And microservices wants to solve all this stuff, which is fine. So that's kind of the system that we're going for, right? Like we've got all these different systems that work with each other over a network. And this really brings in some hardcore, and by hardcore I mean big and complicated enterprise architecture concerns. Now, the burgers I'm talking about are both the actual applications companies have, but also more commonly when I'm talking about a burger, it's the framework, the kit of stuff that people need to run software. I find that explaining this concept that you need a kit of software to run software is very hard to explain to people and convey to people who don't know how development works. So sorry about that. But I want to show you where'd Sophie go? Let me get this back for her. Maybe if we tuck this in here. I might have to do a little break here in order to allow for moving the baby to something more exciting. Obviously, she doesn't like the scales she's working on here for her participation, but we'll see. See, she's just making her own problems, just knocking it off there, baby. But why you have these things, I've selected a few kind of enterprise architectures. This one is from one of my favorite books. Even though it's way back from 2006, I think if a lot of people who are figuring out enterprise architectures and how to transform their organization, if they went back and read this book, they would be pretty well set, right? Like there's the usual sort of thing where the cycle, the release cycle people were operating on was much slower than it is nowadays. But really, all of the considerations you're going to have for how you do your enterprise architecture are written up there, all the way up to the business side, and it's a good thing. But there's a couple of examples of at the time, so in the mid to early 2000s, what enterprise architectures look like, what your burger is going to do for you. And this is one from Delta. I mean, this one, there's also one from ING, which I couldn't find the picture I had of it. But Delta's good because we all kind of know how airlines work, and you can kind of see this is like the everything enterprise architecture or burger that's needed for how Delta runs. And you can kind of see, right? Like there's the down here. Normally when we're doing things nowadays, it's funny, you can tell, or I would guess, whoever was making this was very focused on operations, right? So they made this unconscious value judgment that anything on top is sort of like the most valuable, the one you care the most about. So they have their operations, how they deal and think internally up top, and customer experience down there at the bottom. You know, my first suggestion on this diagram would be to reverse it, but whatever. But you can see how the way we experience it, right? Like there's software represented here and kind of flow, and then you got all the nervous system, the databases and things. But it's interesting to see how someone broke that architecture out, right? The software that we had. Now, we had a paper a little while back that kind of like suggests a generic banking architecture, right? And what's interesting about this one, what you realize when working on a lot of enterprise architectures, is a lot of the applications you do are basically like a workflow, a very, very common workflow. You've got intake, you validate things, you move it around, you add stuff to it, you might apply policy. What's kind of, I don't know if that's what LDM is, but like kind of not represented in here is sort of like someone makes the decision. And, you know, there's other stuff. Once again, we kind of put the user stuff at the bottom there, kind of unfortunate. But, you know, the whole point is, eventually, for most businesses, you sit down and kind of diagram out what the flow for everything is, right? Like the different people involved and how it passes off, how the software is passing off and connecting between two things. So, the next thing I want to go over is, she's really excited about this part. The next thing I want to go over is this history of burgers, right? And as I'll get to at the end, I mean, part of it is me being an old guy and being like, nice way to put old wine in new bottles with your burger. But I think it's useful when considering new burgers and thinking about, do I want to build my own sort of platform, my own paths, or should I sort of like orient myself around the knowledge and the history? To be frank with you, go with a vendor like the Tanzu portfolio. Sorry, the VMware Tanzu portfolio. Now, there are other options, competitors out there that do not exist. There's really only Tanzu that you can look into. I would recommend them over these competitors that don't exist, and instead just come to the one true greatest platform, the Tanzu way of doing things. But if you're considering these other platforms that don't exist, in addition to ours, kind of go in there. In addition to all the ones that exist and don't exist, you know, it's good to kind of have an orientation of what's going on there. So, way back when, right, we had something. Let me click on this. We had something called CORBA that was trying to solve this problem of distributed applications. Now, do I accept this? I don't know. I don't. You know, usually when something like this comes up, I actually like to click on. You know, this and kind of like I would go through all of these and learn how the data that I'm using, you know, how they're using it. I wonder, are we in here? Let's see how VMware. No, VMware's not in here. How about some of our other people? Why don't we take Oracle Data Cloud? We'll check that one out. Let's come back to it. Microsoft might be in here. Who else? Who else? Maybe they have us listed as old. Pivotal. Rackspace, that's good. Let's check out how Oracle Data Cloud is going to use my information. So let's see. You know, because before I click on accept, I really do need to look over this. I don't know how I could accept it. So one, I know who. So I'm a U, so that means I'm a consumer. Okay, let's look at this a little bit more. It can change over time. Well, gosh, I hope they send me a notification about that, preferably through the mail. Because I'm going to want to you know, I like to keep track of all the accepted things I've done. And what I like to do is when it's been updated, I really want to go through and kind of reevaluate because I might want to contact someone there and ask and tell them that I no longer want to have that there. I don't know. I don't want to bore you. Normally, I'd set aside a couple of weeks to read through all of this. I like this one, Sokiomatic. You know, anyways, like I said, I don't really have time, so I'm just going to accept it for now. Anyways, so I came over here, and if I remember, there was a pretty, I like this diagram that they had here. Let's open it up in a new tab and really kind of take a look. And I like this one, as I recall, because check out the style of that clip art there. So again, thinking about the distributed application, right? All these components. The idea of CORBA was you're always going after decoupling thing. What do we mean by decoupling? We're going to have separate components, right? Like we're going to have our SkyCap desk, the software there, and our ticket thing. And we want to decouple them so that they don't have dependencies. I think she's trying to remind me of something. But basically, you want to make it so that all the different applications you have, you don't have to release them all at once, and you can do them differently, and that they can talk over a network. And CORBA was really trying to get to this. It was just a whole structure for if we're running a distributed application, our application spread across everywhere. What is a method? What is an opinion that we can decouple things and look up all the components and manage this? And so you would specify what your interfaces would look like, the language. You got all this. I'm not going to go over it, but the issue with CORBA was that it was really complicated, and it was hard to get up and running. And I remember I was at some startup trying to do a SETI at home kind of thing with it, and it was not good. It made a lot of money, lots of stuff put into place, and it's fun to look at the PE, the ownership history over the past 30 years of CORBA things, and where it's passed hands and things like that. But whatever. So then we came to Java 2 Enterprise Edition, J2EE, or as it was renamed, JEE. Now, this was the stuff that I was into to a certain extent, right? And here we go. We're straight up into Burgerville here, right? Now, what you'll see in burgers is usually, so we're doing distributed applications, and I'm going to illustrate in a burger all of the different services, the backends, the things that we need, right? And so you can see here, we're doing great, right? Now this is a particularly astute burger, and this is one of the things that I really appreciate about J2EE, that, to be frank, I think a lot of us in the burger business nowadays, most all of us, we kind of forget about these top parts, right? And this was kind of a legacy of that. Let me take a little break, and I'll spare the baby from having. All right, I'm back now. Just so that you don't get too spooked out, I'm gonna put my son here. Look at that handsome guy. He can kind of be a stand-in. I don't think he's really well. He did appear one day when he was running across the back screen in his skivvies. Anyways, let's get back to it. Why don't we? So, as I was saying, one of the things that is often left out of burgers you see nowadays are these kind of usually this diagram is developer experience. But it's nice to kind of detail what all this stuff is. And this is, if you've ever heard me talk about what I think is missing in the cloud native, whatever we call it nowadays, PaaS world, it's this stuff, right? There used to be, let's see if we can find it. If we come over here, J2EE bookshelf, there were probably many feet, if not meters, of these books that Sun would put out that were basically all about the different components of the burger, right? Let's see what we got here. That's a little too much O'Reilly, but like, I forget what they were called. They were like Sun Press, maybe? I think the Addison Wesley people did it for him. See this, we'll get to this in a little bit. But it was actually, the nice thing is there were a lot of books that kind of had this type of cover, right? Ooh, boy, I bet this is a real page turner. This one nowadays, but you had all these sorts of books in this series that basically covered all the components that you had, patterns of how to use them, and just kind of the expectations, right? And that really tends to be lacking in the way that we do things now. I think kind of in a beneficial way, there's been an explosion of options and way to do it that you can't really sit down and document it as well as you could back then, which I think is something I'll get to towards the end. But anyways, I think thinking in this way is kind of a legacy of the kind of Rational Rose, like all-in big documentation thing where you would kind of make up these burgers. But you can see in J2EE, right? This is, at least for me when I learned it, this is like every burger that comes after this is a footnote, I mean, that's a, there's a funny thing that like all of Western philosophy is a footnote to Plato. Haha, jokes. I mean, for a person who I don't know if it was literal, but believed that people used to be connected together in circles. I don't know if you want to have that be the footnote for everything. And also that whole anyways, I won't go on. But you can see that, right? Like there's components that help you out with transactions, sending email, messaging, security, management. You could replace a couple things like JSP, Enterprise Bean, like some of the names around here, but it's pretty much the burgers you'd see nowadays. And the important part of this, right, is that you had a stack, an app server. You had a standard that would run all of this stuff. So that was, this is kind of the burger that I went learning through. And again, I think the key thing that we'll get back to that was interesting here is it became an industry standard, which is to say most all of the vendors supported and thought about things in this way. So you don't have to learn their own proprietary way of doing things. Also, because of that, there was a lot of documentation and a lot of understanding of what it was, and also a common body of people who evolved it, which had its own problems, as we'll get to. Now, I think one of the things that we had, you can go read some of the commentary I had on Platform as a Service in 2011. And also, I'm going to skip over service-oriented architecture. Well, maybe not. A service-oriented architecture was kind of in parallel and with J2EE, and also .NET was doing. I was never a .NET person, but they had, as always with Microsoft, except they had kind of a parallel universe that was pretty much the same thing, right? So they had mustaches instead of being clean shaven. But the SOA was yet another idea. It was interesting because this idea of XML was around at the same time, and this idea of compatible data formats was around at the same time as well. And all of this stuff kind of mixed together. But the idea of the SOA world was like, let's specify a burger even above that and have concepts like a registry. Now, a registry being how things find each other, right? Like it's like a telephone book. And then also what SOAs wanted to pay attention to is specifying how a workflow would occur, right? So how you go from one step to another thing. And then also specifying the data format for thing. And I remember reading maybe a supply chain spec at some point, and it would try to specify in XML. And XML is like, what does XML look like? XML examples. Like, it's fine. People complain about XML, but like they also complain about YAML. Like you complain about everything that you have. It always sucks eventually. Not really like a big deal, but here's a good example of what XML looks like. Like all the Ruby people were like, why do we need so much text and when we could just have whatnot? And now we have YAML, and people complain about that. What are you gonna do? But it was really this idea that if we all had industry standards of how to represent data and how to kind of exchange data back and forth, that things would be awesome. Now, there's a whole lot more going there, right? A lot of also what an SOA was again, that standard way of representing your architecture. And in fact, there were some interesting extensions. Let me see if RedMonk's old compliance-oriented architecture is up. Now, when I started at RedMonk in 2005, this was a paper that they had put out about a year or so earlier. Did they actually put a diagram of the compliance-oriented architecture? No. But, this might, I keep meaning to go back and read this, right? Because COAs are one of the very common things that people are always asking about when it comes to cloud native stuff. And I wonder if, as with all things, they probably sorted out, and not, because they were smart and interesting, but they probably also, just because, people have always sorted things out in the past, and we love, reinventing is the effect. I think the reason that we like reinventing stuff is because it gets old and kind of borky and doesn't work really well. And we just get bored with it. And there are generally better ways of doing things, right? But you're following the same needs and patterns. So SOA came about, and then let's get into let's get into one point, and then we'll kind of wrap up here on kind of like bringing it to the present. So there's a great. I've been reviewing a book that one of these little O'Reilly books that So someone in the organization who watches this frequently sent it to me, and it's great. It's about like basically, as it says, figuring out getting past obstacles when you're running Kubernetes. And there's this passage that I was reading yesterday that reminded me. Right, there's this one part that I think is pretty good here, which is like it's like blah blah blah, and then what we saw is that we tended to think about applications. I'm reading this, but there's this way of there's a fuzzy separation between what the app is, how it's defined, how it's coded, and how it's run. And really unfuzzifying and in fact collapsing those two things is a lot of what agile infrastructure, as Andrew Schaefer called it, and I think I always have to go look this talk up in a 2005 talk that he did. And then later on, it became known as DevOps, and then you had the famous, Flickr presentation at 2009 or 2008 velocity. But the idea became that like those burgers we have are really nice, right? Let's go back. Let's go back to the great burger. So this burger that we have, fantastic, love it, especially like the lozenge type of thing there. But the problem is we're not spending enough time on running it, on the operational things. We just assume that, IT service management and ITIL stuff, that's their own thing, so the ops people will have to do it. So this, when it came to burgers, right? So first, when this idea came about, what it was the era of was the full stack developer, which like all things with people who are sort of progressive in ideas in any fields, one of the first things you do is you find the previous words for things and concepts and you stab them in the heart and you draw and quarter them and say that they're terrible. So while we may have started with the phrase full stack developer, we quickly said that that was terrible and bad. But it brought in the era of the full stack developer where you were a developer and you also use things like Chef and Puppet and Salt and Ansible and all these other things to basically get your hands more into the release and configuration management. And then you would carry a pager and you were this full stack developer that was going to support everything. And meanwhile, over in Google, they were inventing site reliability engineering, and they were very quietly like, don't know about that. And indeed, what we see in enterprises is that you don't really have full stack developers. It doesn't really scale so much. I'm just going to throw that out there without any proof or reference or whatever. So in trying to defuzzify this, I think, way back in, is it 2010 or 2009? I forget. There's a Cade Metz article that covers the start of Cloud Foundry. And there were other efforts to do this, but I do work at VMware on Tanzu. So I'm going to talk about Cloud Foundry, the one, only the best platform burger that's out there. There are other burgers that exist, but they don't actually exist. They're just sort of ideas that competitors talk about. And I'm sure they're fine, but they're just non-existent. The only one that exists is anything called Tanzu. There's some people who came from Google and whatever, and they're product managed by James Waters, and they came up with this Cloud Foundry notion. And this notion brought in, it started off as a public cloud only thing, but it brought in a lot of the operational concerns for things and really thought, what happens if we think about the infrastructure concerns, the runtime stuff as a first order concern in our burger. Now, to be fair, app servers thought about it as a first order thing, but effectively people didn't, I don't know, it didn't really pan out as it should have. So this kind of comes along. It'd be fun to have found like I probably have it in my notes somewhere if I went and looked through my Evernote stuff for screenshots of it. But we came to this new type of burger, a platform as a service burger. Now also you had Google App Engine, you had Heroku. I think Salesforce was doing something in that area. It was a weird time. You should go look up that kind of my burger write-up. But around 2011, let me see when this or 2015. Let me see what this is dated. So anyways, Brian Gracely came along, and I think he did a pretty good job of, when he was at Wikibon, of kind of coming up with two ways of thinking about these burgers and representing them. And he called them structured versus unstructured platforms. And we would call that opinionated versus unopinionated. But again, he came up with a burger, the new sort of burger. And again, other people had been working on it, but his is freely available. There's no paywall. And I liked it. And, too bad he didn't come to work with us. He works at Red Hat. He does good stuff over there, I'm sure. And he's always very perceptive of stuff. He's Good guy. But so you can see how he's come up with a new burger here, right? And again, the thing that you should notice about this burger, let's go over here, not really any runtime concerns in this burger. Over here, lots of time on infrastructure and runtime concerns, right? So that defuzzifies things, and it makes the burger now cares about how it's run, right? The burger goes across the firewall into production. But you sort of have the same thing. Now, I always don't like the word scheduling. What this means is you have a container or piece of your application, and you want to put it on a computer somewhere to run. And there's all sorts of other nonsense, but you know, scheduling to me means at this time run this thing, like batch job management, but whatever. But you know, you've got a registry or service discovery. You got to find different components. You're managing all these things running together. It's all done through networks on here. These are your various components, and you know, then you manage the configuration. You've got to have all the backing services. Now, this is a very high-level thing, and by necessity, because it's trying to pull in all the different components, right? It doesn't list everything. If you were to break it out, there'll be all sorts of different stuff. But I think it's great, right? Like, he kind of came up with this, put it out in 2015, and this really helped define a lot of the burgerize stuff going on. Here's another kind of view of the burgers, right? Like, as he says, complex distributed systems. If only there were also simple distributed systems, life would be so much nicer, but this is a bit redundant. But you can see there's all sorts of things that you need, right? Another list of features. And then at the time, so this is 2016, but you can see there were all sorts of people vying to be in the burger supply chain, right? There was stuff going on there. Did he? These are like a lot of open source things, and we got operating systems there. Where did I'm not? It looks like he doesn't have the Cloud Foundry stuff over there, if I'm not missing it. It's kind of the components. You know, a lot of what Cloud Foundry was pulling this stuff all together instead of having instead of curating it, having a structured platform. Anyhow, all of this has basically, at the moment, collapsed down into Kubernetes, which, you know, if you see the likes of me and other people complaining that Kubernetes is just one part, or the idea of a platform for building platforms, what they mean is you got all this other stuff, right? When you have Kubernetes, and Kubernetes is really kind of like this part here, but you've got all these other things that you need, so you need to add that on top of it, and it doesn't, you know, Kubernetes doesn't do all this stuff. So let's check in about in 2017. Now this is there's much prettier versions of this, and we even have some newer versions if you go to tanzu.vmware.com. But you can see around 2017, this is the pivotal Cloud Foundry, now called the Tanzu Application Service, and it is a lot more detailed about what's going on there right now. Again, let's look at the burger baseline, right? Like all these different services, things that you're doing. Now, if we come over here, again, you can see we've defuzzified because we have operational concerns down here, right? Like ways that you're doing C placement. That's nicer than scheduling. You got all that. But you can also see how we start to have all these other components that developers need, right? Like even ETLing. I'm not sure why that's in quotes. You know, I love it when you put things in quotes. Like, does that mean like, you know, ETLing, but like, you know, ETL. But you can see how, as with all kind of burger things, it gets confusing the more stuff you try to put on there. You got to have sympathy for the burgers makers. But you can start to see there's, you know, all the kind of concerns that you need, everything that kind of needs to be on board for a burger. And this really starts to become a platform. And what's valuable here, right? Like if you remember the slide of awesomeness, right? Like performance and business improvements people have. A lot of it is removing the tedium, the toil people call it, the wait time, worrying about not only kind of, well, you want your platform to integrate all this stuff together so you don't have to worry about integrating it together on your own. That's a lot of what we're going for in the platform world. But here's another burger, right? And I don't know, I should probably go look up, you know, let's entertain ourselves. Let's go see if we can find the current Tanzu burger and see what it looks like. We'll go to products and application service. You can see our new page here. We've got all sorts of people doing things. Huh. Oh, yeah. I like this burger. This one's good. You got to be careful when you're cutting and pasting this about transparency and color. So whenever, just a little tip, whenever you're putting together slides, make sure that you get the PowerPoint. And you want to get the one that doesn't have a screenshot, and that way you got a lot more flexibility. But you can see the improved burger here, right? You've got your infrastructure-y stuff, and here's that fuzzy line. Then you have kind of like managing. This is kind of like on top of that. This is where a lot of the platform as a service thing comes in. Then you've got the application developer stuff here. And because it's thinking about ingress, that is incoming stuff, right? Like you're managing networking stuff, and here's applications, and around here users. Anyways, brand new burger for you that's represented there. But again, think about the burger, right? It's kind of similar stuff going on. And I don't mean that in a belittling way, but like just always be aware of basically what the burger is. So this came out just a couple of days ago, and it's almost an updated version of the Gracely burger, right? That has a few more things, new words. You can see we call it observability now, which I know the people who come up with observability and all the systems thinking people, this must just drive them crazy. That all of us flippantly have renamed monitoring to observability. And they're like, oh my God, you've got to go read that Welsh guy about SynFin before you can properly use the word observability and understand what's happening. Oh, they get all upset. But like, you know, words, how do they work? And language, how does it evolve? But you can see, you know, I think this is a pretty good kind of representation. Oh, here's the one where developer experience is just this wafer thin mint on top, right? Which you can imagine, I think over the next couple of years, as we have kind of standardized on what this burger is, this will be the next frontier of excitement. There'll be a burger on a burger, right? What you might call a double burger, double stacked, maybe even triple stacked. We'll find out. But yeah, I would encourage you to go look this up and look through it, and you know it'll be in the show notes, obviously. But it'd be fun to read through the kind of the Gracely burger and then this new burger and kind of compare how they've evolved there. Now, just yesterday, I think this is the thing I'm going to wrap up on before I go over a few like how to manage your burger stuff, because I got to go pick my kids up from school. But DigitalOcean came out with their app platform. And what's interesting about this is usually when you're looking at a burger, you have this, right? And this is kind of explaining to people how a burger works. But there's a different type of burger you have. This is the decomposed burger done by pricing. And it's interesting because you can see all these features, right? And DigitalOcean being a SaaS, they're telling you the pricing that you have for the burgers that you have. And I think this is it's interesting because, again, it's defuzzifying the operations kind of developer thing that we have there. It's very specific about operations stuff, but it's also listing, right, some of the application stuff that you get, right? Like it's building the burger up here and also attaching a price to it, which I think is a fascinating burger. Like I tried to go find a burger diagram that they have, but they really only have this one. You can check out the docs. So finally, other than entertaining yourself with some burger history, what do you do with this? I think if you are in a burger curation thing, right? If you are thinking about what burger, how do we need to update our burger for our enterprise? The first thing, as I always recommend, is like stop complexifying it. Like, sure, invite us in for an EBC. Invite all our other competitors who totally don't exist in for an EBC. Have them spend half a day going over the macro headwinds, telling you industry trends and how things are doing. That's a fine way to spend your time. But really, take more of the tack that like a Rabobank took when they were updating their burger, and find some development teams, find a couple of burgers you can play around with, and set aside 6 weeks, 6 months even, 3 months, and just start to develop on a couple of burgers and see what you like. Discover what you need in your burger, what you like. Do you really want mayonnaise? Do you want truffle mayonnaise? Do you want mustard, spicy mustard? Have you ever eaten these things? If not, try them. Get that tiny little spoon that you get at an ice cream place and try them out and see if you like them, rather than having us having all the mustard and condiment vendors in and tell you about, like, you know, let me tell you about why you should be concerned about your condiments because of Tesla and Airbnb. You know all that stuff. You don't need us to tell you. Kind of try it out on your own. Come with problems and ask us about that, how we would help you out with condiments on your burger, our vision for a burger. Anyways, when it gets to managing the burger that you have, you're going to need a burger, right? And you know, obviously I'm biased. Don't build your own burger. That never turns out well. We learned this in every generation of burgers. Doesn't go well, right? Like most recently, if you go back, the penultimate to most recently is go read up on OpenStack stuff. People tried to build their own burgers with OpenStack. They got stuck on versions. People would leave. Not a cool scene. And as I mentioned, you see this with people building a platform on top of Kubernetes, the platform for platforms. And oftentimes they spend a year and millions of dollars in staff time, and they don't really have like a operational burger at the end of it. Sometimes they do, and that's great for them, but then they need to evolve it. So you should probably get an off-the-shelf, off-the-web burger. So how are you going to manage that? One, the reason burgers go bad is that, and this is what happened to J2EE to a certain extent. I think Spring came in and rescued this and is constantly working on this. And there's been several rounds where, I mean, Java never dies, right? Java's always said to die, but there's been several rounds where it's been rescued. But what happened was that it became so big, there were so many parties involved, and innovation just slowed down, right? Like, and it was bloated. Bloat is a very judgmental term because you know, it's like saying, is Amazon cloud bloated? Are all the public clouds bloated? Is the stack that you have bloated? Bloated just means it has so many features that it's slow moving. One wouldn't say that it has all these features that are great that I use and therefore that's bloated, right? Anytime there's a judgmental word like that, it just means that you don't like it for some reason. It's not a very precise definition. But you do want to pay attention to, in the overall ecosystem, the burger that you're using, is it constantly evolving? Does it have new features? Is it helpful, right? And I think part of that you need to pay attention to when you're doing your enterprise burger is you really should test out the product management interface you're going to get, right? So when you're doing those EBCs, you should figure out ways of figuring out if you're going to be able to talk with product managers. And I'll be blunt, if you're going to be able to influence product managers, right? Our product managers, great enterprise product managers, know probably the top 20 or 50 customers. They know important deals that are in the pipeline. They're very focused on, obviously, helping the company make money, but they're also very good at prioritizing requests that are coming in from enterprises and understanding features that they need to add because people want to use their burgers that way, right? Now, you can have visionary product managers who don't really talk so much with the customers, but I would advise you to make sure that you have product managers who are also interacting with the customers. Now, you can see roadmap presentations, talk to strategy people. You can get smooth talking yokels like myself to go over these things, but try to get a sense of the relationship you're going to have, the kind of product management interface you're going to have to the burger people, because once you kind of commit to a burger, product management as a function, as a people, they're going to be the ones that you hopefully talk with the most and that you're kind of using to evolve what's going on there. Now, in the open source world, this can mean getting involved with whatever product managers are called in the open source world. So, you know, it's important to know how that's working out as well. Now, the other thing you want to pay attention to is how much of a de facto standard is this? Are my peers adopting this? Are competitors using this, right? If you are using a burger that no one else is using, that's probably a bad idea, right? Like, you know, you don't want to be the first one to try a burger that no one else has tried. You want to kind of use burgers that other people are doing. You can try burgers of a different type on your own in your own time, but if you're managing a 5 or 10 year sort of like stability thing in your enterprise, kind of like figure out if that burger is a standard, because you get all sorts of benefits from, you know, easier knowledge in hiring people, easier to train people, and you'll have a much bigger partner and integration, kind of a third party sort of market to pull from. And then finally, the thing I would recommend is continually, and this is kind of to the product management thing, like continually be asking the vendors and checking on, like, what is your vision, your idea for how we can make distributed applications better, right? Like, never mind the macro effects and headwinds, and that it's all about customer experience and making sure, all the kind of stuff I would talk about, you know, how you need to be competitive and evolve your software. And if you're not a software company, you're soon going to find yourself killed by one who is. If you're not a learning organization, you're going to lose to a learning organization. All that bravado is fun to bring attention, but kind of go a few layers deeper on that and be like, so what do you think the nature of distributed application is nowadays with respect to architecting it, making sure you have a sustainable kind of way of developing it in an enterprise concept, and also running and maintaining it once it gets into production, and kind of always be interesting in how that is evolving. And part of that for a large organization is making sure that there's an understanding and answer for governance. And, you know, we always joke, integrating with Active Directory and things like that. So I really got to leave to pick up my kids. But hey, as always, a call to action. One, if you're interested in the burgers that we have, the only burgers that actually exist. I say that jokingly. There are competitors, but they don't exist. So you should just go to tanzu.vmware.com, check out the burgers that we have. Also, if you want to learn about Kubernetes, start to kind of educate yourself about that. Not only can you go to Kube Academy and learn that for free, if you go to kube.academy, but if you have the more recent version of vSphere running, which chances are you do, as they say, you can actually just get Tanzu Kubernetes up and running in that. We've got a couple of packages. Speaking of the deconstructed burger, you can just get it up and running. You can find some developers or on your own, just start to get your feet wet, kind of figure it out, then have an EBC. Bring us in to talk to all of our burgers about you after you've kind of like kicked the tires and figured it out. We also could come help you kick the tires. We love kicking our own tires. Also, if you want to get more into the developer side of thing, go to tanzu.vmware.com/developer. And finally, if you'd like us to kind of do a workshop with you, it'll all be online now, but an hour or longer, kind of just start to sort out your burgers and your strategy and stuff. You can schedule one of those. And if you go to cote.pizza, you can find a link to do that. And then, as mentioned, if you want to find a reference to all the stuff that's going on, including these CTAs and our old episodes and stuff, go to cote.io/Tanzu Talk, and I have it all listed there. Now, if you've listened this far, I would really appreciate your help in spreading this around, recommending it to everyone that you know. Send it to your children, people that you work with, whatever you may be doing. Put it on your LinkedIn. Just tell people they should go check this stuff out. It's great. And because ultimately I like it when people pay attention. And that's what I'm going for there. And I think it helps me achieve my, don't tell Deming, but whatever my MBOs or my OKRs or my MBRs or whatever, I don't know, there's some stuff in Workday that I entered. I really don't want to go look at it because I'm sure it's just a bunch of stuff that doesn't apply nowadays or anymore. I think I'm supposed to raise awareness and drive eyeballs and stuff like that. So help me do that by recommending Tanzu Talk Daily to people. See everyone next time. Bye-bye.